During Civil Rights Week here at WTJU, we celebrated with a series of original recordings from the leaders and figures of the civil rights movement. Many of those writings, speeches, and names are slowly being lost to history, but one famous letter has withstood the test of time, the letter from Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King. Here to talk with us about the enduring power of this letter is Columbia sociologist Jonathan Rieder. He'll be giving a talk on the letter from Birmingham jail this afternoon at UVA, and we're glad he could make it to the studio this morning. Welcome.
Pleased to be here.
So can you set the scene for the letters, about the letter for those listeners who haven't read it?
Well, we need to go back to 1963, 50 years ago, basically, plus a couple of months. And the movement, or King's part of the movement, had been in kind of rocky shape early in 62 and then in early 63, and they went all in to Birmingham, Alabama. They thought, this violently racist city, if we can crack Birmingham, we can bring down the walls of Jim Crow across the South. And so in April, they begin their protests, and things are not going well. And on Good Friday, King decides he's going to go to jail. He will suffer as his Savior did on the cross so his people can be free. The symbolism was very clear in his mind. So he goes into jail, and while he's there, he tumbles down into a deep depression and panic, actually. And suddenly, a black trustee sneaks him this statement that the 8 most enlightened ministers and one rabbi of Alabama have made, and telling King he's an extremist. And why can't you wait, basically? And your protests are untimely. And King suddenly is surging up out of the mountain of his depression on a tide of indignation. And he starts scribbling his response. So it responds to those who've criticized him, but he's speaking to the larger nation, not just Southerners, but all those moderates, the Kennedy administration, who have always said, wait. And so this starts not only as a philosophic document and a statement about civil disobedience, it begins as a cry of black pain and black anger, and we have to understand that is central to the whole document.
So you're a national expert on this letter from Birmingham jail. Why did you pick this text to study so carefully?
Well, my last book, The Word of the Lord is Upon Me, was very much about King's appearances before black audiences. And my argument was you can't really understand King's crossover work, and the musical parallels are exact in many ways. But his reaching out in I Have a Dream and Letter from Birmingham Jail, I was convinced you can't understand it unless you listen to King. And I spent 15 years tracking down recordings of King's in black churches and mass meetings. And it sort of gives you a sense of the backstage King, which then can sort of illuminate the larger, sort of his more famous works that are addressed to the white nation. And so I wanted to come back to the letter. But the other thing is the letter is King's most sustained treatment of what he actually thinks about race and how you go about change. And it is not King the Dreamer that people are vested in sort of preserving. It's a hard-boiled Christian warrior. And so to me, you know, when you put that, it's a revelation. It's like meeting King anew, and just very powerful. And add to that, it simply as an artistic work, it is like a roller coaster. It is dramatic. It's like these jump cuts in which one moment he's the reflective philosopher ruminating, my dear fellow clergyman. He's utterly genteel and mannerly. He takes people on a tour of Southern white Christianity. I have passed those churches and wondered what kind of people worship here. So the movement through all these different cycles of mood and theme, it just was compelling in its own right.
So what passages do you return to again and again in this letter?
Oh, you're being mean. There are too many. I can't choose. But, you know, again, this is worth savoring over and over. And I've been teaching this letter for more than a decade. And every time I taught it, I would see different things. And then having discovered an unknown black version of it, which King preached right after he got out of jail, actually, helped me hear and see other things in the text. So in a way, I'm reading this text while listening to King. I'm bringing all the sound that I know that he would have added to it if he was speaking it. And so in that light, what I come back to, there are just 3 or 4 of my favorite passages. Don't get worried, I'm not going to camp out here all afternoon. But one, of course, is that great early moment. It's a 300-word sentence in which he starts by saying, why, some people have said, why didn't you wait? Your protests are not well timed. And then King says, it's easy for those who've never known the sting of discrimination to say wait, and suddenly say it rings in the ear of every Negro. King has left that high-principled, universal, my dear fellow clergyman, and he's embraced the identity as a black man. It rings in his ears also, and he says, wait has always meant never. That could have been a line out of Malcolm X when he's decrying white hypocrisy and white tricknology, as he referred to it. And then that sentence starts. When you have watched your brothers and sisters lynched and drowned at will, when you have seen them, it's the black man who's experienced this. He's speaking out of the depth of his heart. When you have to talk to a 6-year-old daughter trying to find out why can't she go to Funtown because of her race, and you see inferiority forming in her line, and it's when your first name becomes nigger and your middle name, boy. And just when you think King is going to boil over, right, he says, he doesn't take a breath in writing, then you will understand why we find it hard to wait. And if you think of that whole structure, he moves from all mankind into speaking as an angry black man, but he pulls out at the end, and just two quick things. There's an intimacy there. He's letting whites into the intimate recesses of black suffering. And secondly, he's saying you may be clueless, but you may not be hopeless. I may get you with empathy as a human being.
So we usually think of Dr. King's most famous verbal legacy as the I Have a Dream speech. But do you see this letter from Birmingham jail as having the same elements, or is it different, or which do you prefer?
King did I Have a Dream basically 4.5 months later. Many of the passages and riffs are previewed in the letter. Other things, like the second half of I Have a Dream, the whole dream idea wasn't part of King's prepared remarks. He started improvising halfway through. But he had decided he didn't have enough time to do I Have a Dream. But that whole last half, which followed Mahalia Jackson saying, tell him about the dream, Martin. And you can see the first half of I Have a Dream is a much stiffer, cautious, read speech. King never read. He cuts loose, and that whole cutting loose, though not the dream part, King gives when he does the preached black version of Letter from Birmingham Jail. And what does he say? I have a dream that one day my country will live in a land where they can be judged by the content of their character. What is the subtext of that? They don't live in such a country now. Even the dream part has a subtext of prophetic chastisement. Then we will be able to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. Black people can't sing it yet.
So you've come down from New York to give a talk this afternoon at UVA. What can we look forward to, and what time will that be?
It's at 3:30, and I believe it's in Watson Manor at the Institute of Advanced Studies for Culture, up on University Circle. I think it's 3 University Circle. And you're not asking me to give all my stuff away. But again, as I've only given a breathless hint, admittedly breathless today, it's such a rich document. I'm not going to try to do some overall, capturing of every aspect of it. The title gives it away. It's really King and his transition from the diplomat to telling the man. It's the rougher side of King when he's giving America hell in his genteel, utterly refined fashion.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on today. I look forward to that talk.
And thank you for having me.
That was sociologist Jonathan Rieder. Rieder will be speaking this afternoon